My name is Max. My world is fire and blood. A road warrior searching for a righteous cause. As the world fell, each of us in our own way was broken. It was hard to know who was more crazy. Me or everyone else.
As part of the holiday sale from Steam, I picked up Mad Max. It was $10 and it seemed like a good deal. I've always liked the original films, and I felt that Fury Road is one of the best new action movies I've seen in the last few years. I waited to pick this game up because I was wary about it, though, and that initial hunch was somewhat on the money. It's an open world sandbox game that generates its content through an overwhelming amount of to do work. There are more collectibles and minigame activities in this game than I can even adequately showcase, but here's the map just for reference. All of the icons you can see range from small scale dungeons to just places where you can collect scrap metal, which is your currency. You use this currency to customize and upgrade your vehicle, and in addition to upgrading your vehicle, there's also blueprints for cars called Archangels, which you can build for achievements, style points, and to get a better sense of what kind of car you're trying to build long term. Upgrading Max himself affects his abilities, armor, and even his style. You have the means to take him from an ordinary wasteland schmuck to a creature much more worthy of the title Road Warrior. All of these outfit options can be changed to fit the style you're looking for, but they do relate to your damage absorption and ammo availability. And holy crap, it's awesome to be able to grow a kick-ass Savage Wasteland beard. Unsurprisingly, the majority of the gameplay comes in the form of driving around the wasteland. That's me doing one of those little side objectives while also attacking an enemy convoy. The driving in this game feels good. It could be a little bit better, but honestly, it's charming enough for the wasteland. It's charming enough for what they're going for. I think what they lack for, or what they really miss for personally, is more of a grandiose sense of convoys and moving around actually on the vehicles like we see in a lot of the classic movies. But in terms of the older, more original films, it's pretty on point, and it is undeniably an incredible tool for creating these awesome action set pieces and just wicked driving sort of mayhem-like situations. It's hard to kind of encapsulate my expectations for more that I want, considering this is like the first kind of Mad Max title that I've played that's actually at least gotten the Road Warrior side of things kind of down pat, or at least the vehicular side of things down pat. But you definitely kind of long for a bigger sort of set piece, and you do, like, the vehicles just aren't as big, they aren't as larger than life as they ought to be. But it's still cool, it's still great to be driving around the convoy, and you've got an excellent feel and excellent moments like these that are just undeniably action-packed and badass. However, you also encounter a lot of situations where, in dealing with an aggressive attempt to take down convoys or piles of these guys, you sometimes end up going off-road or even losing all your momentum, which really takes you out of the action. Here's just 2 clips of that, but I found this really, really infuriating. Losing all your momentum takes you right out of the chase, and it pulls you out of the action. The dungeon or enemy hideouts in the game do an excellent job of really capturing the feel of a wasteland hideaway. They fill these places with enemies, collectibles, and in the larger scale ones you'll find objectives to destroy like pipelines or oil rigs. I wish there were more unique encounters or even puzzles as opposed to just having tons of scrap to collect, but they do a good job of hiding materials around the level. I didn't feel like any of them were too brutal. There were a couple that took me some time, but all in all I found it was pretty fair, and it is neat to sort of explore the world and find the things you're looking for, and they're non-mandatory. I'm a bit of a completionist, or at least felt the need to complete a lot of these things, and also these doors I think are dumb. I don't know why you have to kick them 3 times. It just seems like a time sink thing. There are a lot of places, however, that require gas cans and or explosives, and on several occasions I was unable to get past certain roadblocks just based on a lack of resources in the environment. It didn't tend to be dungeons, more like balloons for synchronizing the world a la Assassin's Creed, or just generally exploring it. The cool thing is you get these action set pieces, again, using those words to describe when you're taking down the refineries and pipelines, and there really are some cool moments available to you when you do these things. And that's in and of itself its own kind of incentive. Like this explosion here is just super badass. My only regret is not looking away at the end of this and then being able to queue up some kind of ridiculous 80s rock and roll thing. There's There's a finite number of enemies and archetypes, so the game does err on the side of redundant, especially when you consider how much collecting slash scavenging there is to do, but the combat does a good job of making up for it by being very visceral and satisfying. Admittedly, the controls could be tighter and your jump is practically useless, but all in all, it's not hard to kick ass. The combat system seems to have taken most of its cues from the Arkham games, and it's easy to avoid damage. It takes a little more finesse to really pull off the perfect parries, but all in all, it's a lot of fun to bust the heads of these war boys that you encounter. The game does an excellent job of making Max feel like a visceral savage in a fight, and when you bust enough heads you enter into a fury mode that offers you additional damage and style. Your dodge is an underappreciated tool that rivals that of Dark Souls, and you have a much larger combo window than you get in any Arkham game. You do, however, run the risk of taking hits during certain animations, which can be pretty irritating, especially when you're on a roll. I really can't stress enough how much I enjoy the combat in this game, and I'm not even sure what it is, because it's not like it's that new or innovative or even doing anything that exciting, but I just really enjoy it. There's something about being surrounded by a band of them and just constantly having the answer. Again, it's something we've seen in Arkham, but it's a little bit better when you throw in additional things like wall executions, shiv counters, melee weapon disarms, as well as melee weapon instant kills and just of the like. There's enough going on that even though this game suffers from like I would almost liken it to the weakness of the first entry in like a trilogy of games or a series of games, and that they have some great ideas, but they don't have enough good ideas, so they tend to just be a little bit more redundant. But in terms of the combat, it's just on point. Like having a shield breaker like that is an awesome solution to dealing with guards that have heavier arms or armaments to take care of. And again, like look at that. When you bust a guy's arm like that and he's screaming in game, you just feel so happy. The way a melee weapon can attack and hit multiple targets, the way you get that perfect parry as a reward, it's just so good. Like you feel like such a wasteland badass. Like it captures a feel like the movies, which is really what this game, I think that's where this game succeeds, is that it, despite the limitations of what it has, despite not feeling big enough, it still does give you these action awesome moments. And I can't even help it. I don't know what it is about these few fight scenes, but this video is going to run long or closer to 10 minutes just because I have such a montage of combat that I don't even necessarily need. I just really enjoyed it, and I wanted to give you guys a full-scale scope of just what you can do with it or what's available to it. But again, you can see what I'm talking about. Like, these are 3 to 4 different areas, 4 or 5 even, and I'm still just fighting the same kind of warboy archetypes. And some of them have spears, and some of them have clubs, but for the most part, they're all basically the same. And at the end of the day, it's still just, do you push X for a light attack or hold it for a hard attack, and do you press Y to get your parry? Obviously, if you haven't put it together, it seems obvious to me anyways, the circle that forms and closes around the Y is how you initiate your parry, and if it's green, it works out really well. This is a neat system as well. When you get grabbed, you can mash your way out of it, but you can also use a shiv to get out of it, and I thought it was cool. The game also has bosses. I would sort of call them bosses. I mean, I feel like there could have been vehicular-based bosses, or again, if it lent itself to the large-scale moving around vehicles, you could have had a lot of cool fights. Like a fight on top of like an oil rig or a tanker would have been incredible, driving across the wastelands. Instead, every boss that I encountered was basically an archetype like this. This one I found to be the most compelling because it was an arena-style boss, but at the end of the day, it's just a big dude like this, recolored. They're like the lieutenants, if you will, of Scrotus. I know he's got his second lieutenant as well as him, but I didn't want to show any of the main scale boss fights. But again, rather than having unique bosses, they just kind of rehashed it and just did different maps, which I think they did an okay job. The first one is a standard melee fight. The next one I encountered had flamethrowers everywhere, and I think this one was my personal favorite. But at the end of the day, it's still just more of the same. But that's what it's going to be. It's almost like this game had maybe just enough budget or focus put into it for the licensing, and not enough to really innovate or step outside and do some new stuff, which is why I think it's not gonna be, you know, the end all be all, not gonna be some big shot game. But all in all, it's still cool, it's still fun. I think for me, for my situation, getting it for $10 on Steam was an incredible deal, but I would have been less impressed had I paid full price for it. But that's generally my policy around a lot of modern games now. So these style of bosses are pretty standard. They've got like an uninterruptible melee attack that you have to avoid. Otherwise, you just gotta beat them down. And at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, well, I've seen every facet of the combat. I get it. It's neat. What about if I don't just want to have to mash X and Y over and over again? Well, the game does a good job of offering up alternative weapons as well as placing a lot of traps and different options around the map. I really enjoyed trying to bait enemies towards explosive barrels and then shooting them. And honestly, even outside of the explosive barrels, you can get away with pretty much just shooting them. Like this one I thought was really funny. Also, if you're like me and you're a cynic, you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's great for the regular enemies, but what about the bosses? That's a great question. Stand by. All in all, I had a lot of fun with this game, and I do recommend it if you can get it on the cheap. If you pay full price, I don't know what to tell you. It succeeds in what it aspires to do in terms of creating incredibly beautiful action set pieces that are totally in the realm and an homage to Mad Max. I had a lot of fun playing it. I don't think I'm done, and oh my god, if you really want to enjoy it, throw on Fury Road on the sideline while you're playing, and you can't help but at least smile your way through it as you enjoy a classic movie. I give this game 6.5 maggots out of 10.